Hello, and welcome to another edition of Maximum Growth Live. I'm one of your hosts, Jay Ruane, CEO of FirmFlex, your social media marketing agency for lawyers, and Finalize, your automated daily accountability coach, as well as Ruane Attorneys, a civil rights and criminal defense practice in Connecticut. With me, as always, my friend Seth Price. Seth is the founder and managing partner of Price Benowitz, your DC, Maryland, Virginia, and South Carolina law firm, as well as the founder of Blue Shark Digital, SEO for law firms with clients all across the United States of America. Seth, as normal, I want to see how you're doing. You know, last Thursday I forgot to say happy birthday, and I felt bad about it because I got so worked up into the show. I forgot. I was going to sing happy birthday, and I didn't. So it's a week late, but happy birthday to you, Seth.
The audience will thank you. It was
Definitely.
It was a good birthday. Sadly, I spent some of my birthday. It was something I'll just share here. A buddy of mine who's been a longtime partner at a big firm. Not their partners, they're partners. He was one of the B partners, really has struggled of late. And, new management comes in, and it just demonstrates what I love about what we built here with our audience is people who are taking control of their future, and that no one meeting can end a several decade relationship and so it was definitely humbling to see a path taken where somebody really could use many of the things we talk about here, and hasn't for a bunch of reasons. It's not their DNA. It's not they're one of the people that you would be hiring. But it was sad, and at the same time, I'd love to use it as sort of a springboard to see, hey, can somebody like that be turned around in the entrepreneurial way?
Yeah, it's interesting. We are the people who watch this show, the people who we interact with at conferences. We are definitely an outlier. We are not the norm because we're thinking about the future in a particular way, and that actually comes to a topic that I want to talk to you a little bit about before we get to our speaker, because I think there might be some synergies there, and it's a little bit about defining who you are and where you want to go. A lot of us get into this practice and hang our shingle, and we have this passion for growth, right? I mean, it's why it's Max Growth Live. We want to grow our practices. But I think there needs to be sort of almost a step back and identify, why are you growing and what are you growing towards, instead of just unfettered growth. I mean, and I hate to use the analogy, but unbridled growth is not necessarily the best thing. In fact, that's what cancer is, right? I mean, cancer is cells that are just replicating and going haywire, and they're just growing to grow, and that's not necessarily a good thing. But
totally agreed. I'm probably more guilty of that than most. At the same time, and it's funny because I'm coming off a call with consultants this morning. We're looking at profitability of different groups, but to another extent, is there a certain value of throwing spaghetti at the wall in different areas because you don't know what will stick? And something you always talk about is things you wanted at 45 may not be the same as 50. Something that I am seeing and struggling with a little bit is employees who were workhorses at one point. They may shift as life shifts, and that's a whole other issue.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big challenge as your firm sort of enters its teenage years. You will have employees that have been with you from the start, and when you're in your mid-20s or early 30s, and you are starting out a firm, you may be in a personality or a personal or social position that's different, or your staff may be, and they, for me, I spent 25 to 36 focusing 100% on my business. I mean, I was really singularly focused. I barely dated, and then I said, okay, I got my business to where I want to be. Now it's time for me to sort of settle down. I luckily found my wife, and I started having kids right away and that type of thing. And then my priorities really changed. It was, how much time can I get out of the office and stay away and let this thing sort of run? And I have a feeling now that I'm 12 years into that, I'm thinking, okay, 10 years from now, my kids will be basically all set. what am I going to want from 60 onward? And how do I build the firm that I'm going to want to be part of at 60? And get me to that point in a decade so that I'm comfortable and I have what I want, because my desires then are going to be different than what they are right now. Right now, I'm happy to, I want to be able to get out at 3 o'clock so I can meet my kids at the bus and get the little league practice. But 10 years from now, that's not going to be an issue. So it's really sort of a lot goes into this sort of vision, and I don't think there's enough conversation about that in our community. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was going to say the good news is, what I have to say pales in comparison to our guest today. I think we should be bringing him out because that's, look, we've had Vern Harnish on. We know scaling up. We've seen his disciples, whether it be Traction or whether it be Strategic Coach. But until recently, I didn't even know that there was a program, that would help you sort of follow the scaling up philosophy and build that out. I knew that there were ones for larger entrepreneurs out there, that Vern Harnish had his Gazelle group, et cetera. But the idea that there are now coaches dedicated to where they are to Traction other areas, we got somebody today who can really dig deep into the Vern philosophy, which, for my money is as good as anything out there as far as scaling and culture and how to run a business and scale business.
Awesome. All right, so then why don't we do this? Why don't we take a quick break? The guest that we're going to have, who's waiting patiently in the green room, is Dan Hurley. He is from Stratecution. That's the name of his company, and he's been working with the Vern model for years, and has really experience with all of them, all the ones that you've just talked about that we've had on the show. And I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation about the things that you need to do to sort of maximize and grow your firm. Not to borrow too liberally from our show title, but I think it's going to be a great conversation. So, folks, sit back, relax, get a cup of coffee or whatever you need, because when we come back, we're going to have Dan Hurley, and we're going to talk more about scaling up your firm. We'll be right back with more Maximum Growth Live. Hi, I'm Jay Ruane, one of the founders of FirmFlex and a practicing attorney for over 20 years. Anyone who knows me knows how my firm runs on the systems we create, and it has allowed us to flourish, even in tough times. I spent years and hundreds of thousands of dollars until I finally figured out a way to engage my audience and drive top-of-mind awareness with social media. And what did I do once I figured it all out? I built a system for it, and now you can put that system to work for you. You see, we took the hard part, creating the content and finding the images, and made it foolproof. Every day you will have curated social media topics to post designed to make your firm constantly remind your audience about your firm, what you do, and how you can help. And the best part? You don't even need to hire a dedicated social media person to do this for you. In fact, you don't even need to hire anyone new. We designed the system to make it easy for you to delegate to your receptionist, assistant, or paralegal and have them execute solid social media for you in just 5 minutes a day. It's like having a content writer, researcher, and graphics designer at a fraction of the price it would cost to hire in-house. Sign up today for the Social Super System and start building your brand where your clients already are, on social media.
In this world today, if you want to grow your business, you want to grow your firm, you want to take on more cases and make a bigger impact, you have to have a digital blueprint. Statistically, throughout the time that we've been working with Blue Shark Digital, our law firm, the Atlanta Divorce Law Group, grew over 1,400%. They truly understand where we're headed and how we want to get there. I have a team in Blue Shark Digital that I feel like has my back.
Welcome, everybody. We're back with Dan Hurley, a scaling up business advisor. Welcome, Dan.
Hey, good morning, gentlemen.
we've had Vern Harnish on. We talk a lot about the scaling up world. I didn't even know that you existed until not that recently. Tell me what exactly is a scaling up business advisor coach, and how do you work with people?
Well, a scaling up business advisor, there's over 200 of us worldwide. And what we do is we subscribe to Vern's perspective on the scaling up performance platform. It's a series of systems and processes associated with those systems as represented by tools that we use with an organization to assure that they're addressing the critical issues associated with growth.
And, for our listeners, we have a bunch of lawyers who are building and growing their law firms. What are some of those things? We've talked to scaling up people, including Vern. We've done a bunch of talks with people in the traction world. A lot of our members may use strategic coach. How does what you do fit within those sort of different worlds, and many who have sort of been birthed by Vern?
All right. What I've found in strategic planning over the number of years that I've been doing it, 25 plus, is that most organizations approach strategic planning from the perspective of we've got to fill a 3-ring binder, and that 3-ring binder will sit on our shelf for a year. At the end of the year, we pull it down, blow it off, and find that we haven't accomplished much of anything. We've reacted to fires, allowed ourselves to be sucked into the day-to-day aspects of our business. So our approach is more focused on strategic thinking. So let's think strategically, and then let's plan from an execution perspective. So the emphasis is more on getting it done as opposed to spending all the time analyzing where we're at, where we're going, those kinds of things. If I compare it to some of the other products out there that you mentioned, it's much more comprehensive. And as I said, I've looked at all of them. And it's funny to find that most of them are extracts of Vern's approach. You mentioned traction. Gino Wickman was a scaling up coach when it was called Gazelles, and left the organization and focused on that $0 to $5 million business, which is, quite frankly, where scaling up at the time didn't focus. You have Patrick Thien and his organization of Rhythm. You have Jim Alampy with his Great to Excellent. You have a number of different systems out there, and all of them have a tendency to be closed, which means that there's a prescriptive way of going about putting together strategy and execution. And Vern's approach is an open system. In other words, we use tools from many different people. In fact, I was just talking to Jay about the Hedgehog Concept from Jim Collins, the Flywheel from Jim Collins, Alec Osterwalder and his Value Proposition Canvas. So we bring to bear a number of the tools. And I think that gets at the heart of the primary difference. A lot of what we do is focused on very experienced coaches, whereas most of the other systems out there, you pay your fee, you get trained in the specific things that they do, and you're not allowed to deviate.
Seth, I have a question here. One of the things that I think our audience struggles with frequently is the lack of business training, and almost law schools look down on the business of law. For most lawyers, they are talked down to when it comes to business operations, because the law schools like to position themselves as a profession well above the little things like earning money, because they are in these ivory towers. But One of the biggest challenges for anybody who's starting up a law firm and then trying to scale a law firm is that, number one, they lack some basic business knowledge, and number two, they have an incredible ego as to their own skill set. And one of the challenges that you and I talked to before we came on the air here was this idea that what gets you to a certain level, at some point, the lawyer entrepreneur needs to almost get out of their own way and bring in the talent that's necessary to actually continue to grow their firm. Can we talk a little bit about that as a coach? How do you help people identify when they are the roadblock or the bottleneck to their own firm's growth?
Well, typically very gently. No one likes to be smacked in the face with, you're at a point where you've reached unconscious incompetence. You don't know what you don't know, which is always a dangerous position to be in, right? So the relationship between the coach and the client is extremely important, much like the relationship that you have with your clients. And there are times when a shovel upside the head is what's needed, but you better have a whole lot of trust, and that client better have a whole lot of confidence in you. It's funny, I have a range of clients, some that would follow me through the gates of hell, and others that are constantly questioning me, trying to figure out how I'm coming to the conclusions I'm coming to. And you use different approaches with different clients. For those egomaniacs, it typically results in questioning. People don't like to be told. So there's always questions about, okay, so you made this decision. What were you trying to achieve? What did you take into consideration when you made it? In fact, I have one client that when I walk through the door, he has a rule. You don't start the conversation with a question. So it's really different strokes, as Sly Stone said back in the 60s, different strokes for different folks, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can we talk a little bit about the role of passion in growing any business? Because, one of the challenges that some people in our audience had was adding verticals to their business during COVID as a pure measure to sort of stay alive. And now, 16, 18 months later, they find themselves handling a business that they don't really want to be in. But in order to sort of reach the scales that I think people want to, I think there's got to be a portion of you that is passionate about your business, right? Money really doesn't drive the majority of people. Would you think that's fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I had an ongoing disagreement with the CEO of a very large corporation who told me the purpose of a business was to make a profit. And I told him, well, I think what you've done is you've confused the metric of success with success itself. Quite frankly, the purpose of any business is to attract and retain a customer or client. Now, the things that allow you to effectively run a business are how well you operate that business, and the metric that tells you you've been successful is profit. As to the concept of passion, as you and I were discussing, I'm a big follower of Jim Collins. I think he's a brilliant business mind. And Jim has this concept called the Hedgehog Concept. And it's really a Venn diagram made up of 3 spheres that overlap. And the first sphere is what you can be best in the world at. Okay, so what you're capacitated to really do well. The second sphere is what are you most passionate about? Or that thing that you don't need a catalyst to get you going. You just naturally migrate toward it. And then the third is, how do you monetize that? Okay, how do you establish that metric? And at the heart of that Where the overlap is between the three spheres is where we typically find your big, hairy, audacious goal. Okay, so it fits very nicely and explains the importance of something like passion. If you're not passionate about it, as you and I talk, most challenges require an impetus to overcome, a catalyst. And in the case of what it is that you choose to do from a business, that catalyst is really passion.
Great. Seth?
Yeah, sure. One of the things a lot of our listeners and viewers sort of probably struggle with is where to start. What are some of the things, look, we've had these amazing guests on. We all know that we need more systems. Jay gets more excited than most about this, but he's right. But where do you a lot of people, they build a business, they're at X point and they're now X plus 3, how, when you see people that end up embracing and working, whether it's with you or anybody else, what are the things that you see people that make that leap well, and what are the ones that would crash and burn where they pay for a number of quarters or a year and don't really get out of it what they could?
Well, one of the things that I'm most interested in working with my clients is what I call the 6 transformational enablers. Okay, we all need to have certain enablers that make the whole issues of business simpler for us, easier to overcome. And these enablers do that. I've developed these over a course of a number of years. I've been an executive coach, worked with many CEOs. And the initial question I've asked each of them gets at the heart of the first enabler, and that's clarity. And the question is, what do you want? Sounds very simple, but if I asked each of you at this point in this conversation, what is it you want? You'd probably look at me and say, what do I want out of what? Right? Out of my business, out of my personal life, out of, how I spend my money, my material goods. And quite frankly, the answer is yes. The clearer you can be about what you want, the more likely it is you're going to get it. So the first enabler is clarity. You accomplish that, it allows you to get the second enabler, which is alignment. If you're building an organization, there's really not much more important than alignment. You want your team aligned on what it is you feel is important. That allows you then to move toward focus. You can't be focused without alignment. You can't achieve alignment without clarity. Okay? When you have those 3 in place, it's time to start working on dedication, diligence, and discipline. Dedication to the business, diligence about the way the business is conducted, and discipline in terms of all of the tasks that need to be completed to assure success. So those 6 transformational enablers are absolutely critical in terms of getting started.
So I got a question for you. One of the challenges I have found in my ability to scale up my own firm is that my outlook on life and my sort of perspective on things is markedly different from the people that I employ. Not necessarily in worldview, as in, for us as criminal defense lawyers, that every life has value and you shouldn't be judged by your worst day, but more on terms of I tend to set audacious goals and want to march to them, and my employees want to be led. They don't want to be the one who is out in front making moves, and I find it a challenge in understanding their perspective, because I'll give them a task and expect them to just go and accomplish it, and they keep coming back to me saying, be involved, we want to know we're doing the right thing, and I'm saying, look, I've moved beyond that, I'm going to something else. How should the leaders deal with those types of challenges when the employees keep trying to pull you back into the business, but your job, I guess, is to be the visionary. Are there roles in each functional business that should be sort of defined so that the business owner can say, okay, this person's going to do this, and I'm going to be able to sort of be the visionary? Does that kind of make sense? I'm struggling to sort of communicate it, but I feel like I keep getting pulled into the weeds, and that's not my best use of time. But yet my employees, despite me giving them as much opportunity as I can, they constantly seek me out to be in the weeds with them. And despite me telling them I don't want to be there, they just keep pulling me. I feel like Michael Corleone. Every time I get out, they pull me back in.
You know, I could spend an hour just talking about that. But let me hit a couple of what I think are the important responses to your question. And I think it starts with selection. We look at strategic thinking from 4 perspectives, and those 4 perspectives are people, strategy, execution, and cash. And each of those perspectives have a question that has to be answered in order to achieve optimal effectiveness. For people, that question there is, are all stakeholders, now we're talking all, not just employees, so that also includes customers, suppliers, the community, owners, are they happy and engaged? And would you rehire them enthusiastically? Okay. So when we're selecting employees, it's important that we operate from a position of clarity. There's that word again. And that position of clarity in most businesses is typically described in what we call a job description. I am not an advocate of job descriptions. The typical focus of a job description is responsibilities. And quite frankly, I don't care what your responsibilities are. What I'm hiring you for is results. So shouldn't I be articulating expectations in terms of results? Okay, requirements and standards. So what do I expect in terms of a result from this particular role? And how will I measure that? So we select people based upon that. Once we get those people in, we struggle with this concept of clarity. What do we want? We encourage people in your positions to delegate. You can't do it all. And if you think you can, then you're practicing it at a minimum, a mild form of delusion. Okay? So in delegating, what we typically find is you tell someone, I need you to do this. And you leave it at that. If you're going to delegate, you need to delegate based upon that expectation. What do I require of you? And how are we both going to know when it's been accomplished, when it's been achieved? Okay? And then you keep a record of what it is you've delegated. Look, in growing my businesses early on, I found that I delegated so much, many times I'd forget what I delegated 3 days ago and forget to check on it. And sometimes it would get done, sometimes it wouldn't, right? And the natural inclination was to go back and blame them. Yes?
Well, no, this is a very common topic for us, as well as a common ailment of our listeners, viewers. What are some of the best practices so that as you do that, you should be delegating? What are some of the systems or techniques you've seen that work best to make sure that you do have accountability and that it's not set it and forget it?
Well, accountability is part of your execution system, right? It's something that you set up front in terms of clarity of expectation. I have a performance model that I use that was developed by a fellow named Gary Rumler out of the University of Michigan Institute for Social Research. And what Gary says is that 90 to 93% of all issues in organizations can be attributed to leadership. because leadership's responsible for setting those expectations, putting people in situations to perform, providing a consequence for both positive and negative performance, and then issuing feedback. Okay?
I was trying to be
So-
more granular. And then, look, I get that. But are there any things, I'm sure that, like, we have people out there, because what you just said resonates with me, I'm sure with Jay, where you set things in motion. You have your systems, but are there any systems that you have seen, checks and balances? Because as a busy, growing leader, you know, there are things that you sort of may put to people. Are there any sort of techniques or methodologies that have been more successful for leaders on the micro level to make sure that the different things they put forth actually come back and are accomplished?
Yeah, well, I think you're not probably going to like my answer, but I'll give it to you anyway. And that is, we have a saying, and that saying is delegate and do so effectively. If that can't be done, automate. Okay, whatever it is you're trying to get done, automate it. And if that doesn't work, look to eliminate it. Okay, so delegate, automate, eliminate. And quite frankly, from an accountability perspective, that's a choice. You choose whether to hold someone accountable or not. So it's really not a system issue. It's a human issue. And most of my clients have problems holding people accountable. Whether it's they're unclear as to what they were asked.
Is it because they forget what they've delegated, or is it because they just don't have the backbone to hold somebody to the feet to the fire and say, I need you to do this?
Well, it's probably a combination of both. I find that if you look at that from the perspective of a continuum, it runs the range of that continuum. I've got some clients who have a certain behavioral preference. Are you familiar with the DISC instrumentation?
Oh, yes.
And that would be an S, right, on the far end of the continuum, whose locus of control is external, not internal. So they're all about others. And taken to extreme, that leads to a martyr syndrome, where I'll throw myself on any sword. It's really not your fault. I must have been unclear. I must have not given you what you needed, kind of thing. I have clients that are like that to the other end of the spectrum, where, the beatings will continue until morale improves. So, the point about accountability is it's a choice. And I was just talking to a client yesterday in your field of endeavor, and I said, you have a tendency to get what you accept. Okay? People are going to give you what you accept. And so if you don't hold them accountable, they're going to expect that they're not going to be held accountable, and they're going to perform accordingly.
It's interesting that you bring that up, simply because I think the nature of some lawyers, and this is something that's interesting. It's happening in my personal life with some extended family members going through a divorce, and I'm looking at it from an outsider's perspective, and I'm saying, there's going to be conflict, but the people and the other extended family members, they live their lives trying to avoid conflict, whereas I, as an attorney, understand there's always going to be conflict. I can have conflict with some of my best friends, and it has nothing to do with how I feel about the person. Conflict is inevitable in nature, and I think part of the problem with being a lawyer entrepreneur in this situation is that you might come to a problem with delegation and see it immediately as an opportunity for conflict with a subordinate, because you're comfortable with conflict and you're comfortable with it, but they are not. And so conflict to you is not something that's necessarily a bad thing, but it can really hamper your business if the people you have in it that are trying to, shut down in the face of conflict. You think that's a fair way to sort of read the situation?
Yeah, as I look at the whole issue of conflict, I think there are societal norms that we've adopted over a period of years that has moved us to the point where, if you think of conflict, it's really a continuum, right? In my mind, it starts with contention. Now, contention is healthy. We have a mild disagreement. You have a perspective, I do, and what we try to do is work with each other to come to a common understanding. We move from contention, if we're unsuccessful there, to confrontation, where now we're a little more aggressive around the language we use, our body language, the way we use our body to support our messaging, maybe intonation, cadence, those kinds of things. And if that doesn't work, then we move to what we know as conflict, which is really, your hands around my throat and, mine around maybe your shirt. But our societal norms have led us to believe that whole continuum is conflict. So in essence, what it's done is it's made contention, which is healthy in organizations, sort of an unacceptable practice. So I think what you're describing is this whole societal norm that anytime you disagree, that's conflict, and it's not.
Yeah, I think that's a huge takeaway for our audience, that inevitably when you're trying to grow your practice, when you're trying to grow your firm, there's going to be contention, and that's a good thing, and that's a positive thing, because it's through that you can have breakthroughs that can elevate you above your competition and take you to a new level. And if it devolves into conflict, that isn't necessarily something that you can get a benefit from. But if you can thrive through the contention, you can really take yourself to another level. So my last question for you, before we send it back to Seth to wrap it up, is a little bit about, when you first approach a new client, someone who you're going to help sort of get to that next level, is there something that they have to focus on first? Like if someone were to call you up and say, I want to start being coached by you, I want to get to that next level, and I've already been able to sit down and do this, what would help somebody who's coming into your method of helping them scale up? What should they do before they call you? Is there something that can make a difference to get them to the right place to be able to be helped by you? Because I got a feeling there are some people who call you up that are just complete messes, and you have to sort of, it takes you, 3 or 4 or 6 months.
And I'll put this as my comment, because I want to let him answer, but I get it, because I hate when I call a consultant and they give me what I call the low-hanging fruit that I should have just done before. Jay's asking, what are the prerequisites? So you don't walk in, not waste your time, but we get to the heart of the matter rather than the stuff that really should be self-work that's done. You could say, do these 3 or 4 things before you call me so we can get to the meatier
the stuff that matters.
Yeah, well, we talked about it earlier. First and foremost, you really need to get clear on what you want. And I mean, what result do you want to see? So many people call it a vision, right? I don't really care what you call it. Just describe what it is you want. What's this look like when you're done? If you can identify specific things that you want to see, that's wonderful, because when I walk in, I typically find that they really don't know what they want. And we have to spend an inordinate amount of time. And as you know, your business is no different than mine. Time is money. An inordinate amount of time trying to figure that out. So first and foremost, figure out what you want. If you're going to start working on something that we might continue to work on the core. Understand your why. What's your purpose? My particular purpose is to effectuate extraordinary results by creating conditions for success. That drives everything I do. Okay, so I'm all about creating opportunities for you to be successful. So your purpose, your values. What are the guidelines, the principles that guide your business that if violated would require you to terminate a relationship, whether it's an employee or a client? Okay? What do you want to achieve? What's that BHAG? And how far out is it? You know, in some cases, I have clients that are preparing to exit the business, right? And they're looking at a 5 to 8 year horizon. Well, they're very different than the 35-year-old who's planning on being in business for the next 25 years, right? So if you do those 3 things, actually 4 things with clarity, you're off to a very good start. I can then step in and say, okay, you've got a big piece of it done. I understand what you want to achieve. I'm clear on how best to go about that and where to start now. And we can get off to a much more efficient and effective start.
Well, this is great, Dan. Thank you so much for your time. We'll make sure to put a link to your organization in the comments, and the insights have been invaluable. Thank you so much, Jay. We'll be back soon with more of Max Growth Live.
Well, Seth, that was another phenomenal conversation. I mean, I got to tell you, like I said, I took notes, and it's rare on these conversations that I take as many notes as I did today. But a couple things jumped out at me. And one, first and foremost, when you're talking about the whole delegation thing, there was a bit of a clarity of delegation, which I think is something that maybe I need to work on in my own firm. What were your takeaways?
For me, I know for myself, and we see this in much of life, whether it be business, sales, whether it be dating, whatever it is, the rule of 3s. And I feel like the more time that I spend in the Vern universe, understanding and hearing different ways of it being presented, that each of those takeaways, the takeaways are the same that we've been talking about, but getting you to think about, okay, with what I have right now, how could I start implementing some of these? To me, that was a valuable use of time.
Yeah, and the other thing I really liked was defining jobs as what the results were going to be rather than the responsibilities. I'm actually going to go back. I've decided to take it upon myself. I probably should delegate it, but look at each one of our job descriptions in our office and rephrase them away from responsibilities to results, so that there is clarity there for the people that are coming into those roles. Because I think that's interesting. And that whole thing about the Venn diagram, what you love, what you can monetize, and what you can be best at, I think is something that all of us here should really consider as they're trying to set forth their vision. And finally, I really loved his accountability thing. I mean, I know I recently finalized because I needed help with accountability and daily accountability coaching, and that's certainly something that you need to find whatever trick it is to make sure that to hold you accountable to do the things that are necessary to move yourself forward. But this has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed this one. I got a lot of good stuff out of it. I'm sure I'll go back and listen to the podcast a few times just to make sure that I'm pulling everything out of it. What else you got excited for in the future? I mean, we're heading into Labor Day. Schools are back in. Kids are out of the house for the most part during the day. We haven't been quarantined yet. Have you guys been quarantined?
We got another week, so we're still with the kids for a week, and I guess it's coming up. It's by the time I'm trying to think. For me, what I would say, the piece, and it dovetails not on the personal level, on the business side, but sort of why my mind didn't quite transition well from your comment, is as we've added overseas labor to help each department, I think that has forced us to get more granular about what people do, because when you're forced to delegate work from an existing employee, I think that has made us better and focused people in what they're doing that much more. And so it's ironic. I didn't realize this would be a benefit of that, but that by bringing people on to support existing operations at the firm, it forced the existing employees to become more focused in what they were doing. And that's been a huge, unexpected but positive outcome of adding additional tangential labor.
Yeah, it's interesting. Last week we had David Hassel from 15.5 on, and I actually went out with my team and we actually created a weekly question just to our overseas people, because there's stuff going on that we might not necessarily know of or think of. One of the things, a hurricane hit Honduras this week, and that caused some disruptions. And one of my VAs, overseas staffers, whatever you want to call them, had some issues with resources for food in their town. And that she actually put on the weekly report that was a challenge for her this week. And I didn't even know it or think of it because, I'll watch the Today Show. Al Roker will tell me that something's going on in Oklahoma. Great. If I had people in Oklahoma, it would matter. But I have no idea what's going on weather-wise or culturally in other parts of the world. But I need to know that stuff because I have people there now. And so, that's why it was great getting the stuff from David last week. And I said, I got to start thinking about this stuff. And when I sent that out and I started getting responses, I got a couple of DMs directly from my overseas people saying, thank you for thinking about me. Thank you for engaging with me like this, because it shows me that I'm really part of this team. And that's what I like. I want them thinking team first.
Absolutely. And so, it cost me some money, but bought licenses for all of our overseas people after that with the same concept. It's, and at the law firm, we've been using it for staff. And the question is, do we include the attorneys into it? Not cheap, but do we allow them to be able to give the high fives and make this interactive? Again, like anything else, there's so few things we can do to improve morale and culture. That this seems like, especially in this disassociated world that we now live in, that trying to double down on it.
Yeah, I mean, if you have any number of employees that are not in your office, I can't speak more highly of having that type of engagement platform or product or something along those lines that you can do. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I started off. I read about 15.5 in Inc. magazine. I signed up for a trial, took their questions, and I created using a Wufoo form and a Gmail autoresponder. I created a simple free version of it because I wanted to. I couldn't afford the spend at the time. Now I can, so it's even better.
Well, but the other question is, and we see this all the time, right? I'm sure torn. It's real money. At the same time, if the engagement is higher using a polished SaaS platform, is that worth it?
Absolutely. And the thing that's crazy about it, and I'll say this and then I'll wrap up because I know we're going long here, is that when COVID hit, one of the questions that we have is one great idea. And what's that great idea that we can implement to make our business better and that type of thing. I actually had the time and I went back through like 2,000 questionnaires, just clicking through and reading the great ideas. And we were able to implement, like 20 or 30 of them. Sometimes it was doing certain things, changing the way we approach things, stuff that, 2 years ago didn't seem relevant, but it was an idea and somebody gave it, to now all of a sudden we have the time, we have the opportunity, and it seems more appropriate. So that data that you're collecting now could have value the next time we have a pandemic, folks, which I hope isn't for another 100 years, but who knows? Things happen. Something else could happen, 5 years from now that we're suffering through. So, amass the data that you can use. But Seth, I think we're going to leave it right now for this week. What another great show. Thank you for being with me. Of course, if you want to follow Seth, you can follow him on his YouTube page or follow Blue Shark Digital, where he has the SEO Insider, a great way for you to keep up on what's going on in the world of digital marketing. If you want to catch up with me, you can check me out at Finalize, FINLIZE.com, or through my agency, getfirmflex.com. Of course, if you love to talk about systems like I do, we talked a little bit about it during the show, please join our growing Systemizing Your Law Firm for Growth Facebook group. We're up to like 400 people exchanging ideas, talking about systems that they can implement. And it's a great way to sort of engage with people that are talking about the things you need to scale up your firm. But with that, Seth, I'll leave you. I'll see you next week. Have a fantastic Labor Day weekend. And anything else you need to add?
No, have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend, folks. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.